time. Perhaps, DM, before I answer the question, what is important to note is that for the first time in a long time, NSFAS is doing a consultative process with the draft guidelines or proposed guidelines. Something our stakeholders, mainly the students, have been calling on, that we should consult widely before we implement the guidelines. So I think that's the first important thing to note. The second thing, DM, to note is that with the guidelines, they come from our board having listened to students through their representatives in the name of SAUS, in the name of SAFETA for the case of TVET colleges. But we also had individual consultative sessions with SRCs before we could formulate the guidelines. And also, DM, as much as we would like to incorporate everything that our stakeholders need, that our students need, it's also important that we do this, to note that we do this in the context of budgetary constraints. Having said that, then, DM, some of the issues, I think you've touched on the 75%, and you've correctly articulated why it came about. We are also trying to standardize at least the cap amount when and as far as it relates to student accommodation. We are also trying to look at progressively trying to bridge the gap between what is the allowances that are given to students, particularly those that are in TVET and universities. We know that over the years there have been disparities. We are also trying to put in measures of what we do and how we deal with those that are seized with defrauding students of their allowances. But we're also trying to put in place controls to avoid those that should not be eligible to use the scheme, but they end up accessing the scheme, thereby taking spaces for people that are deserving of that. So in summary, DM, that's really what we are trying to do with the guidelines. It should be noted that issues that are government policy related issues are not in the purview of NSFAS, and therefore those are not addressed in these proposed guidelines. Those are matters that are being dealt with by the ministerial task team that was appointed earlier this year. Thank you.
So, okay, so the CEO, the big issue is not only the 75% issue. There are a whole range of other issues in the guideline. Would you want to just, touch on those, and then we can then talk about how far we are with the application process just after that?
Thank you, DM. I do want to touch on a little bit on the 75% issue, along the lines that you've indicated, DM, that so the scheme as we know it today, it's a bursary scheme. And therefore, it's a scheme that students access, or beneficiaries access the scheme on the basis of household income. If your household income is below 350, you are funded. And then also, if you are a student or a person with disabilities, your household income moves from 350 to 600,000. Now, in essence, what that means, DM, is the scheme is widely open. There is no academic at the inception of a student wanting to access the scheme. There are no academic hurdles that have been put in place. Now, it therefore follows that being a bursary, we know that particularly with private funders, it has to come with conditions that you have to perform. And what we've introduced is, or what we are trying to introduce is that students have to at least pass, and this is a proposal. I should indicate that this is a proposal that is still under consultation. What we are putting forward is that students should at least pass 75% of their courses or modules. So that, because whilst we have the N plus rule, we need to make sure that there is return on investments, to make sure that students do actually complete before the N plus expires. Having said that, what we are proposing in the guidelines is not to introduce this measure as of next year. We are saying this measure will apply from 2023, and also it will not affect those students that we call first-time entrants, because we understand that for first years, they still have to acclimatize to university life, having been in high school. So that is, I think, is the most important thing to highlight. It is quite unfortunate that the media sought to sensationalize this issue by publishing an article that was not factually correct. At the same time, this was still under consultation. We are not saying that 75% is going to be the ultimate and the final proposal, as we are engaging different stakeholders. The stakeholders that we are engaging include USAF, which is the association of all the vice chancellors of all the universities. These consultations include SACPO, which are college principals. They include student representation. We've engaged the Human Rights Commission. We've engaged the public protector and many other stakeholders, so that we make sure that we consult as widely as possible. Then the next issue that we are trying to tackle in the guidelines, currently institutions charge for accommodation. There is no cap that we've put in place, particularly for universities. So for private accommodation, the cap that has been in place, which is not a cap that is sustainable, was that if a student, or how you charge private accommodation, you look at the highest cost of the residence of that is owned by an institution, and therefore that's what a student is allowed as their cap currently before we implement the guidelines. What that means then, DM, is that it creates disparities. If you just take institutions that are in close proximity, let's say, for example, you take UJ and VETS that are almost in the same city and operating in the same areas. If it so happens that the institution, one of the accommodation for VETS, as an example, would be, say, for example, 60,000 would be the most expensive accommodation. For UJ, it would be the most expensive, let's say it would be 50,000. It therefore means that a private accommodation student of UJ will be given a maximum of up to 60,000. One in VETS would be given a maximum of up to 50,000. Now, the very same students have to look for accommodation in the same spaces with the same landlords. So therefore, that formula doesn't make sense. What we are trying to put in place to make sure that there is value for money is to put a cap that is applicable to all institutions. And as such, in the draft guidelines, we are proposing a cap of 33,000 per annum. How did we come to the amount 33,000? That is the cap that is applicable for TVET colleges. But again, it is not the final amount or number that we are looking at. We are still consulting. That is what we had put forward as a proposal. So the key highlights, really, DM, of our draft guidelines are really those changes. We are also putting in place measures to try and bridge the gap between the allowances that are of students that are in TVET colleges and allowances of students that are in universities. The same principle applies, that the very same students end up sharing the same accommodation. The cost of living is the same for all the students. Therefore, it doesn't make sense that these amounts are differing. But of course, we understand that the fiscus has got budgetary constraints. Hence, we are progressively trying to bridge a gap between these allowances, something we are unable to do once off, given the budgetary constraints, as I've indicated.
Okay. Just one other thing before we get into application CEO. The matter of the which programs are funded always becomes quite a contentious issue, and I want you to really clarify what is it that will be funded and what will not be funded, because students, for instance, who are doing LLB, and some of the students who are doing postgraduate diplomas and all of that have been in a fix as it relates to are they being funded, will they be funded. Yeah, what's the status as it relates to that?
DM government policy is for NSFAS to fund first qualifications. We are not allowed in terms of government policy to fund second qualifications. In other words, postgraduate qualifications or second qualifications would not be funded. A student who's studying LLB, if a particular institution is issuing LLB as a first time entry as a course that is an undergraduate course that is funded, where a student has had a qualification and they want to then progress with that qualification to an LLB, which makes it a postgraduate, that would not be funded. And it should be noted, DM, that this is not, as I indicated earlier, NSFAS funds on the basis of what is government policy, and government policy is that we only fund first-time qualifications. It does therefore not mean that we are not looking at this. This is an area where we are doing research currently to assess which qualifications lend themselves to require that a student has to have a postgraduate qualification before they can access the world of work. So we are busy with this research. By doing so, part of our mandate is to inform government on student funding policy matters. And therefore, we are hoping that the outcomes of that research we will table to the shareholder, which is the minister, which will further be taken up with cabinet to assess whether or not there is any change that would be required for that. So in essence, those qualifications are not funded. Also, the issue of legacy qualifications, these are qualifications that have reached their life, and therefore, which means that they are no longer relevant for the market. We also do not fund those qualifications, except in circumstances where institutions have applied for an extension and these extensions have been approved by the CHE. But we do fund qualifications that would be equivalent qualifications that are replacing those legacy qualifications. And the question here, DM, is, as you indicated in your opening remarks, it's not just about funding students for the sake of funding. We are funding students so that, one, they can attain a qualification. Ultimately, they should then find employment, and then therefore they should contribute in the economy, which also then would change their current circumstances. That's really the aim of funding. So it therefore doesn't make sense to continue to fund qualifications that would not yield any or bear any fruits for the students or our beneficiaries.
Okay. Now, the applications process for 2022, how's that going, CEO?
We think it's going well, DM, but we do expect that because we opened our applications almost at the same time as the matriculants started writing their exams. We do expect that when they complete their exams, we'll get more applications. As it is now, DM, we've got over 220,000 applications that we have received. You would recall that when we were in this space a few months back, we had spoken about wanting to make real-time funding decisions for our students, particularly those that are SASSA recipients. So far, with the applications that we've received, we have been able to make 26% real-time decisions, which translates to about 57,000 students. Other students, as we indicated before, these are students where we have to review their cases in detail. these are students where we have to look at their household income through SARS, and we would recall that SARS has not concluded its assessments this year. It has not issued the tax data for the incoming year, and so we are holding those other decisions, awaiting for that process to be completed. But we think it's going well so far. And of course, we have our teams that we are mobilizing to go to areas that we deem to be rural, that would not necessarily have access to apply. We are deploying our teams there. And also some of the NYDA offices are being used to assist students to apply. In cases where there is no connectivity, we do take manual applications as well. So yes, we think it's going quite well, DM.
Okay, good. We're going to open up for those who've joined the space, if they've got questions or comments, to start accepting those who want to speak. And I really want you to cut your questions to the point, or your commentary to the point, because we have about 27 minutes for that. So we'll be accepting the the questions just now. But just one final questions, CO, before I open for Puseletso, Metlodi, and a whole range of other people. Now, we're closing on the 7th, isn't it? On
That's
the 7th
correct.
of January. Yeah. And so far, how many applications have we received?
Just over 220,000.
So over 220,000. And obviously those numbers will be peaking, towards the 7th of January. So we really want to call on all of you, if you know someone who's doing their grade 12 or they are grade 10 and they want to start at a TVET college, please do encourage them to apply for their NSFAS bursary if they do qualify. And if you can, please do help them, especially those who are current beneficiaries of NSFAS. You've done the application before, you know what it means, how it gets to be done, and all of that. It's now even much more simpler and faster responses, decision making from the NSFAS, and all of that. So let me start with Annette Skosana.
Hi guys, this is Annette Kosana from the East Rand. Sorry, I'm in a taxi, but I just want.
Oh, you're in a taxi. Okay, all right, good.
Yes, I'm in a taxi.
All right.
I just wanted to find out. I heard the gents speak about sorry if you already have a qualification, they don't fund. But if the qualification is undergraduate, then they will fund. I want to ask because I just completed my highest certificate with UNISA and I applied for my degree. So do I qualify or do I not qualify? Or do people with higher certificates qualify or not qualify?
Pemi Matsunyani, you've got a question.
Yes, good evening, DM, and everybody that's listening. I wanted to find out, on my side, I'm applying for more than one child. So I want to know how will that be assessed in terms of the income level that is considered to be acceptable according to the NEFSA's regulations. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Tabo?
How is it?
Good, Tabo.
Awesome.
What's your question, comment?
Yes, I wanted to find out when you registered on my NSS account and you lose your number and then email address, how do you recover the account?
Okay, we're battling to hear you, Tabo.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to find out how do you recover my NSS account if you've lost your number and the email address, because you can't log in unless you have the number.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good question. All right. Tambaletu?
Hello. I wanted to, I'm not sure if you can hear me very well because I can't hear myself.
We can hear you.
I wanted to ask if I apply to do a diploma next year, but if there are chances that I can change the course after I've done 1 year of diploma to a degree, will NSFAS continue to fund me?
Okay. All right. CO, can we tackle those questions?
Thank you, DM. So DM higher certificates are not considered to be the qualifications in the sense that I explained. The listener, Annette, would be allowed to apply for that in the same way that a student who had completed a qualification in the TVET sector could be allowed to apply to university, and that would not jeopardize their chances of getting funding. In the case of Pemi, who is applying for more than one child, so on first application, if the threshold, the household income is above 350, you would initially be rejected. And of course, you can then appeal the decision having provided those facts, and that will then be assessed on appeal. My NSFAS recovery, Tabo should contact our call center or through the channel indicate, click the button that shows that they've lost their password. Then they'll be directed on how to reset the account. The issue
what's the call center number, CO?
I'll get it for you, DM, before the end of the call.
Okay.
And then Tembaletu, changes of qualifications are matters that are dealt with by institutions for as long as the student is eligible for funding and is within their N+, NSFAS will continue to fund them.
Okay. Did you answer the question about when someone is applying for more than one child?
I did, DM.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's fine. Let's take some more questions. Let's start with Maututin Tido.
Okay, thank you very Hello, thank you very much, sir. I would like to ask if NSFAS will be funding students for new students next year, starting in 2022, doing Bachelor's of Education.
Okay. All right, we got that. Let's take Temba. Temba?
Hello?
Yes.
I'm not Temba though.
That's fine. You can go ahead to Tembiso.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to everybody. I have two questions. We can start with the first one. I heard say earlier on speaking saying that the allowance for students who are staying off campus for their accommodation will be now capped. So I want to ask, for instance, in the towns or in the places where the cost of living is high and the rentals, they be starting from 3.3 upwards a month. Will it be enough to cover everything, the cost for the student? or the student will now have to find another means of paying for other expenses along the year? That's my first question. And as for my second question is about the, 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 the implementation of this NSFAS accreditation accommodations that are being currently implemented in some of other institutions, which are quite not fair to some extent, considering that most of the requirements that are mentioned there, they come with the very expensive accommodations. How do we go about that as students, or how do students deal with that? Or NSFAS doesn't have a way of meddling in, maybe making it much more reasonable for everybody else involved.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Stembiso. Let me go to Vision. Vijendra.
Hi.
Vijendra?
He's not there. Can I speak?
No, you can't speak.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry.
I'm here.
There is he
Hello.
now. Yes, Vijendra?
Okay, I have one question, please.
Yes, please.
The what I wanted to find out was the with regards to the appeals. The appeals, like if someone's appeal has been approved, what happens now on the system? Because obviously the college or university has to load the information, registration information, but there's still no changes on the student portal. So
Okay.
what happens in that case? Yeah,
All
I'd
right.
like to.
Okay. Thank you for
For how
that.
long do we have to wait? Thank you.
All right. Lee Mbali. Lee Mbali.
Hello.
Okay. Yes, Lee.
Hi guys. My name is Mbali from Durban. So I had a problem with the portal. I think that was 2 years ago when I was trying to apply. So I was not able to get a feedback if I got NSFAS or I did not. So last year what I did is I decided to go to NYDA to apply using the forms. So I just did the follow up. I think it was on January, and I received the funding. So I had a problem at UNISA. I was not able to pay the money that I was that I was owing. So I have a question here. If I need to reapply again for 2022 because I did not use the funding for 2021 since I was
Okay.
not.
Okay. So you want to take those questions and then we'll take some more?
Thank you, DM. So BEd, and I think there was a misconception, DM, that we do not fund qualifications that lend to students to being that lead them to being teachers. So qualifications are funded that are those that are studying towards teaching. It's only the legacy qualifications that were not funded, those that expired in 2019. In terms of the questions that Stembiso asked, so firstly, will the amount be enough that we've put forward? As I indicated earlier, the amounts that we have put initially in the guidelines, we had assessed them to be enough. However, we are getting inputs from other stakeholders, and so these amounts are not final amounts. They will still be considered further. And the expectation, really, when we do set these caps, is that students do not have to top up. That's why we are putting this amount. So the expectation is not that students should top up. However, there is an avenue where, in special circumstances, an institution can apply to exceed the cap, where we will look at various factors, and that can be approved, which would also require concurrence of the minister when we allow such exceptions in cases where there could be more. Now, in the case of accreditation process not being fair, I think we should understand why accreditation needs to happen. One, we need to make sure that the accommodation students end up in is suitable or it's fit for purpose, meaning it's conducive to learning. And so that is why it's important that it has to be accredited, it has to meet the minimum standards. However, there are exceptional circumstances. Again, there are areas, there are rural areas that do not have a suitable accommodation. Yes, for such places, that's where we allow exceptions to the rule. On the question of whether or not NSFAS does not want to get or is not involved or will not be involved, NSFAS per annum funds about 11 billion worth of accommodation. And so it really does not make sense for us to be bystanders when we spend such monies. Our aim is to improve our involvement in this space. Because we spend such monies, we should be in a position to negotiate better deals for our students. We should be in a position to dictate the standards that we need for our students. And of course, without letting too much in the bag, we will be coming into that space and coming up with how we think NSFAS funded students should be accommodated. On the issue of appeals, indeed, when the appeal is approved, we do communicate, we do issue a funding list that institutions see, so they will know that a student that is registered with them has been funded, and then they will submit registration data to us, and then we will make all the necessary payments. Indeed, Vijendra is right in that our portal does need a little bit of improvement because there is a time lag between when we make these decisions and how we update our portal. So our team is busy, our IT team is busy improving our portal such that we students get real-time information as changes happen on the portal. But that improvement is still underway. For Mbali, who I just need a little bit of clarity. If Mbali was accepted in UNISA and is being funded, she does not need to reapply for 2022. However, if in fact, even if she was not funded, if she was eligible in 2022, to the extent that her circumstances have not changed, she would still be funded. But I think it's important that she just indicates, because if she didn't take up a space, she would then have to reapply.
Okay. So there's Tabo who I think we did respond to Tabo, but Tabo, the call center number is 0800 67327. And whoever else want to, I mean, the call center, NSFAS call center is 0800 067 327 if you want to call them there. And then I'm going to take Lawrence Manaka.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So I wanted to find out if NSFAS is aware that their system or their portal is currently not allowing us to gain access to it. After you put in your email address and your password, it's going to take you back to the very same site or to the very same page where it says that you must key those details, right? And then the second question is, what will happen to students who could not access the second chance funding because the NSFAS portal was also down, and we have evidence of that because we also tried to reach out and we were ignored, and at a later stage we were told that we must try to apply next year.
Okay, all right, Mr. P.A. Papi.
Oh, afternoon, sir. I just want to find out, is NSFAS again next year going to pay accommodation via the institutions, or they're going to pay direct to students? Because the delay institutions sometimes causes, it's a problem for us as students.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Papi. Ekaneng Gift. Ekaneng gift. Okay, let's go to Tony.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a question based on college level.
Yes, please.
This year I was I was I was registered in Lovedale College. So then I applied on two universities, on two colleges. Sorry, on two colleges, Lovedale College and Buffalo City College. So first of all, the Lovedale College responded first, so I registered there in Lovedale College. Then after all, I felt like no, this qualification is not meant to be. Then I go to Buffalo City. I registered there. Then I came back to Lovedale. Then I deregistered the qualification that I was doing at Lovedale at Lovedale College. I am funded by NSFAS this year. So when as time goes on, while I'm in Buffalo City College, they stated they did not see me funded by NSFAS. So I wrote the email to NSFAS explaining the situation. Then this year, on September or October, they responded to me saying I should send a proof of registration and my RT copy, or all the supporting documents. I did that. So my question is,
What's your question?
my question is, do the payment are going to reflect on Buffalo City College, or they're going to reflect on Lovedale College? Because like I haven't received any allowances yet.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Okay, Ekaneng, let me get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My concern here is based on this year's so 2021. My status has been on processing registration. So when I ask NSFAS, it says course code error. Now when I go to the institution, it tells me that no, the course code is fine. So the problem is with NSFAS. And now I'm not sure whether my fees will be paid or not.
Okay. Khati.
Thank you, Buti, and thank you, Karisha. I just want to ask, between National Skills Fund and NEFSAS, how do those two correlate? I say this because I was funded by the Skills Fund for a number of years, but right now when I tried reapplying, I was told that perhaps you guys get your learners from the pool of NEFSAS. So if learners want to directly apply to the Skills Fund, the NSF, how is the process taken there? Thanks.
Okay, Rudzani.
Okay, thank you. There's a thing that I've seen, like, okay, you find that maybe in Joburg, the accommodation, they have a cap on some places. Maybe they say accommodation is 3,000, and you find that a person paying by cash maybe is paying 2,000, and you wonder why is it NEFSAS always most of the places they take the whole amount other than the price that they put there. That's my question. And the other one is that sometimes I think I see it mostly in university, like at home, because my sister went there. You find that they get allowed late, and then they don't even get all the money. So what happened to their money? Maybe they say that instead of giving you 40,000, and when you get 30,000, how do you come about to report such incidents?
Okay, thank you. Karabile, I'm going to take all of those that we have already accepted as speakers, and we're not going to accept any new ones. I'm going to explain how we're going to deal with the rest of the other ones who are on the queue in terms of dealing with their questions. But we're not accepting any more speakers from now on. Prince?
Yes, thank you so much, TM. I just want to ask with regards to historic debts, especially for 2020, there are students who were funded by NSFAS, but their debt has not even been cleared yet for 2020. So is that something that NSFAS is attending to or not? Thank you so much.
Okay. Karabilwe.
Good evening, ladies and gents. I'd like to get a clarity regarding those students who were not approved for those who didn't meet the minimum requirements in terms of the modules they should pass. So I want to ask a question regarding those students who were not approved. Uh, is it possible for them to continue next year without applying?
Okay, Sipo.
Good evening,
Okay,
everyone.
Sipo, yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
Sipo.
no, mine was around because I heard, I'm sure it was last week when the 75% issue was actually spoken about. And I just wanted to check as to when does this actually kick in, because it has actually created a lot of noise. Can we get clarity on that?
Okay, Sipo Lebogang.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My first question is, I have a sister who was receiving the 350 SASA grant money last year and this year actually. So next year she wants to use NSFAS and she wants to know if it's going to affect her application. But she deregistered the 350 SASA grant. My second question is, why doesn't NSFAS fund practical courses for NATED courses in college
What do you mean?
for engineering?
What do you mean practical courses?
I mean practical. Yeah, when you're done with your NATED, they don't fund you. You have to apply outside the college to get your practicals for you to end up getting your national diploma.
Okay, that's a separate issue, but yeah, we'll find a way of responding to that. All right, Daniel.
Okay. Thank you.
BM, can you hear me?
Yes, Daniel.
Okay, then thanks, man. My question is actually centered around the repayment, not the application, because I was funded for 3 years, but on my fourth year, I decided that, you know what, because of financial situation improved, then I'll fund myself from there. But I've been fighting with NEFSAS to do the repayment. I mean, it's been like a year now. I'm not getting any statement. I'm not getting any form of. I try to access the portal just to see how much I'm owing plus interest and all that. So can the speaker just direct me to the right channels? Because I mean, I'm trying to repay what I was, given by NEFSAS, but it seems like it's a hit line for me to do that. So I don't know whether it's the portals or what. So it's becoming frustrating for me. Thanks.
Okay, all right. CEO, if you can respond to those questions. I know there are many, but I had to take as many as we could. We still have about 31 requests. People want to ask questions, but I'm going to outline the process from now on. But if you can respond to those ones.
Thank you, DM.
So
I think we're starting with Lawrence's question on, are we aware that our portal is down? I personally was not aware, but we've got a team that is monitoring the portal 24/7. So if it is down, indeed, they will attend to that. And then the question raised by Pati, whether we'll be paying accommodation allowances to students directly. No, we will not be paying directly to students. We'll continue to be paying through institutions, but as I indicated, we are working on improvements on how we deal with private accommodation. Whatever we do, it will certainly not be to students. It's likely going to be directly to the landlords. The issue of term of dual registrations, the institution that he's ultimately registered on, which is Buffalo City, would be the one that would receive the payments. However, I think this issue of dual registrations is an issue that is really affecting a lot of students. This relates to the time difference between when institutions submit to us deregistrations, and so this is a matter that we are addressing quite closely. But ultimately, the funds will to be with the institution that Tom is registered with. The issue of Ikaning, where the registration code is an error, there's an error in registration code. Not to play the blaming game. So how we have qualifications registered in our portal, it is through what is provided to us by the HEMIS data and what is registered with CHE. So when it's reflecting code error on our side, it means the code is not yet registered in those institutions. However, I would urge that Ikanen goes to their financial aid officer who knows the servicing agent of that particular institution of NSFAS, so that that specific matter can be dealt with. On the issue of NSF and NSFAS, the NSF happens to be one of our funders. We get funding directly from the government. We get funding from other government departments and from private entities. So we only fund NSF beneficiaries based on the conditions that would have been given to us by NSF. I'm sure NSF has its own process on how it funds directly students, but that is at least how they engage with us as NSFAS. The instances where NSFAS pays the full amount to an institution and the student then gets lesser money. Of course, if there is no valid explanation, that is certainly not allowed. NSFAS funds for accommodation, for tuition, meal allowances, books, and personal care. So, to the extent that the institution has been paid for its tuition and accommodation, all allowances are supposed to go to students. Of course, where the tuition is more than what was initially envisaged, that money cannot be given to the student. However, we urge anyone who feels that there is some fraudulent activity to either contact 0860-247-653, that's our fraud line, or SMS 30916, and then they'll get a call back. Or they can email nsfas@thehotline.co.za to report any instances where there may be unscrupulous activity taking place. Where there is the issues of student debt that was raised, so there are the following reasons why a student can accumulate debt. There are those students that were funded by NSFAS when NSFAS was funding through loans, and the loan scheme had a cap amount. So if a student amount owing to an institution was more than the capped amount, the student would then be owing. In cases where a student is funded under the bursary scheme, there shouldn't be outstanding amounts. However, there are students that are stuck in the project that we call the closeout project, meaning these are reconciliation differences that we have between ourselves and institutions. We are deep in the reconciliation processes with institutions. We are hoping that most of the easier cases will be cleared before the start of the academic year. Of course, there will be exceptions that will still drag up until, say, about June, but this is something we are looking at. Of course, there's a question of historic debt, which was funded for NSFAS to consider historic debt of the students that I indicated earlier. And of course, we are refining the process on how institutions should apply for historic debt. When we initially started this project, it was not applied correctly, and so we are now improving it so that those matters are dealt with. But we are continuously engaging institutions to make sure that for those students that we can see and can be easily confirmed that those students are funding while we are busy reconciling, that they should be allowed to get their certificates. On the clarity on when is the 75%, if it's going to be 75% going to kick in, I indicated earlier that it will be applicable in 2023, and it will not affect first-time entrance students. It will be only for continuing students. The issue of the 350 SASSA grant, the relevance of the 350 SASSA grant is NSFAS. In how we fund, we say any potential beneficiary of NSFAS that is a SASSA recipient of substantive SASSA grants is automatically funded in inverted commas. The person who receives a 350 grant, to the extent that they do not get any other SASSA grants, they will be assessed based on household income. It does not mean that they will not be funded. We will look at household income to assess whether or not they are eligible for funding. The question of experiential training, which is WIL for TVET college students, indeed, as it stands now, we were not funding WIL. However, we are engaging with various stakeholders because WIL indeed is part of the academic program of students. And so we are hoping that we will implement improvements soon after we are done with a consultative process as to how we can go about funding WIL. But it's something that is receiving attention. On the question of Daniel, who has been trying to repay, I would request that Daniel does call our call center, and I'm sure he has been doing so, 0800 06 7327. The reason why we have not been sending statements is we are improving our system to allow for it to issue statements. And of course, we are almost done with that process, and we'll be able to send all the statement to all the beneficiaries that need to repay. However, I think I do urge that Daniel contact our call center so that we can assist him with starting that payment process. Thank you, DM. I think I've covered all the questions.
All right, thank you so much, CO. So what we're going to do, I mean, we have 32 people who have requested to speak, actually more. So I'm going to ask all of you just to tag me on my Twitter and also to tag the NSFAS on your question. And we'll get the CEO to get his team to sit through for the next hour or so, responding specifically to those questions that have been asked emanating from this off-the-cuff session. We unfortunately cannot go on beyond this. My apologies that we cannot, and I see all of you, the 34 of you that have made the request, please tag me at Buti Manamela and at my NSFAS as a question that emanates from off the cuff, and the CEO will get himself and his team to respond to those questions in the next hour. But also just to say to the CEO and his team, I think you can see how huge the demand is in terms of clarity on a whole range of issues. I mean, we've taken about 25 questions today. And all of those, I mean, none of the questions are similar, which shows that there's a huge need. I mean, there's a big demand for the NSFAS to interface with the recipients of their bursaries and the potential recipients of their bursaries. All of these confusions that needs to be clarified. So I'd really advise you to, on your own, have this kind of discussion with the students probably on beyond the platform. I know that you're hard at work with your team, engaging with getting people out there, doing a lot of engagement. But for today, for the next hour, if you tag me and if you tag my NSFAS, we are going to be looking at your questions and responding to those questions offline. But thank you very much, all of you who've joined us in today's Off the Cuff, discussing the key issues around the NSFAS. We will, in the course of the week, announce the topic for this coming Friday. But thank you very much, and see you on Friday at 3 o'clock. Bye.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. That's a wrap of another Off the Cuff with Buti Manamela. As the Deputy Minister has explained, we'll be back with more Off the Cuff. Keep your eye on the Deputy Minister's timeline. It's at Buti Manamela. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.